families. So here to break this down and a whole lot more is adjunct professor at Montclair State University, Dan Geltrude. Okay, so Dan, according to this Qualtrics Intuit Credit Karma survey, 80% of Americans say they have felt a notable increase in grocery prices in recent years, with more than a quarter saying higher prices have led them to occasionally skip meals. Dan, and then a third saying they spend more than 60% of their monthly income on basics, including things like food and rent. Dan, this does not sound like the United States of America when people are having to skip meals. I mean, what does this tell you about the state of the economy right now?
Well, it shows you that we are struggling as a nation economically. Keep in mind, Alex, that over the last 3 years, we've had 20% inflation, because you have to look at inflation cumulatively over that period of time. Wages certainly cannot keep up with that. So we find ourselves in a position where we had sound economic policies just 3.5 years ago. I go back to, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we've certainly made things worse over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Biden administration can gaslight the American people all they want and say everything is great right now. But I think everyone knows when they go to the grocery store now, they're picking stuff up and having to put it down because they simply just cannot afford it anymore. Let's stick with inflation. So the rising inflation causing childcare costs to surge, with a typical American family spending a whopping $500,000 over 18 years to raise a child. That's according to LendingTree. And then you have data from Smart Asset showing childcare costs are most expensive in states like Massachusetts, which is sitting at almost $36,000 a year. That's followed by Hawaii, Connecticut, Colorado, and then New York. I mean, Dan, will the high price of childcare in states like Massachusetts and New York just drive families, number one, out of the state? And then I think a lot of people, the young people, are looking and saying, well, I can't even afford to have a family, have children at this point.
Yeah, that's really true, Alex, that you're looking at migration continuing from blue states to red states. And when you look at the fact that people are going to work and all the money that they're making, perhaps with that second salary, is going to childcare costs. So you find yourself actually working more hours and falling behind. So that's exactly why people are saying there are certainly certain states that we just cannot afford to live in, and therefore we have to go to, quote unquote, greener pastures, and you can't blame them, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an endless cycle. You have a family, then you have to take on a second job to be able to afford child care costs, and then you don't want to have to pay for child care costs because that's too expensive, and it just never ends. So the first quarter of this year, the average American homeowner gaining approximately $28,000 in equity during the past year. That's according to CoreLogic. Yet rising interest rates make accessing it harder than ever, with the average home equity line of credit rising to 9.2%. Dan, what does this mean for anyone looking to upgrade to a new home or just want to tap into their home's equity?
Well, let me say this about equity. It doesn't really have an impact unless you're able to use it. And how do you use it? You either borrow against it or you sell your home. Well, right now, people can't sell, thus the low inventory, because any place they go is actually more expensive. Then, as it relates to tapping into equity to be able to borrow to, let's say, fix your home or do other things, it's simply become too expensive. So I hate to say this, but all this equity that's been accumulated is really wasted because it's simply too expensive to use it in any productive way.
Yeah, Dan, this has been, we don't really have any lighthearted segments to really talk about today during our business hit with you today. I mean, but this is the reality of the American people right now. Dan Geltrude, thank you so much for joining us this morning and breaking it all down for us.
Thanks, Alex.